Chapter 795 The Final Hurdle 1. The situation in Idonia was anything but favorable for the three races. The demons were relentless in their pursuit, and although those of the three races did their best to hold on, the situation started to deteriorate for them quickly, and their side began to suffer an increasing number of casualties as the war continued. Retreat. The situation got so bad that the three races were forced into a retreat. Although the demons' numerical strength was not superior to theirs, they were significantly less well organized than them, and each of their strategies appeared to be easily seen through by them. In the main camp of the three races, the dimly lit hall was filled with the sounds of heated discussion as representatives of the three factions gathered to discuss the ongoing war with the demons. "We can't go on like this." The elves, with their lithe frames and pointed ears, stood alongside the orcs, their muscular builds and fearsome visages contrasting sharply with the elegant elves. "I agree. We can't go on like this." The dwarves, short and stout with thick beards, sat at the head of the table, their stone faces betraying nothing of their thoughts. They quietly listened to the conversation between the elven and Orson representatives. One of them abruptly stood up and smacked the table. Smack. "Of course we can't go on like this. All you brutes focus on is individual battles and don't think about the greater picture. We are not cowards like you dwarves. We don't retreat the first moment something goes wrong. That's exactly why we're losing. Calm down, that's only a small part of the problem. Reality is that the demons are stronger than us," one of the elves said, finally intervening in the discussion. "Blaming our individual shortcomings at the moment will bring nothing good to the war. We have to change the discussion to a more productive one." Even so, the discussion was tense, with each faction accusing the others of failing to do their part in the war effort. "As things stand, what we need to do at the moment is minimize our losses." As the debate wore on, it became clear to the three races that the current situation couldn't go on. With each passing second that they spent here discussing, more and more casualties were starting to pile up and every second mattered. "It's not about minimizing the losses." One of the elven representatives spoke up. She was beautiful, with silky silver hair that contained streaks of gold. She was the calmest of them all, and her eyes scanned those in the room. "Minimizing the losses is important, but that's not the main problem that we need to solve." She spoke, her voice ringing inside of the room like a bell. Her next words brought the entire room into a state of gloom. "What we need to do at the moment is find a way to deal with the strategist." With a grim look on his face, one of the dwarven representatives spoke. "You think we haven't tried that? We've already tried multiple times to send assassins to kill him, but whoever this strategist is, they have multiple duke-ranked and even a prince-ranked demon protecting them. It's not something that we can achieve without sacrificing a major part of our force. It's simply impossible." The room fell into silence again. None could open their mouth to argue with what he said, and it was this reality that made the mood even gloomier. "Then, what do we do?" An elf finally spoke. "The elders are fighting against the leaders of the demons and the leaders are up against the demon king. We still know nothing about the situation, but from the last time we spoke The elf never got to finish that sentence. At that exact moment, while he was still speaking, everyone's expression froze, and a ringing noise echoed within their minds. The reactions varied, but at that moment, everyone stood up from their seats, faces paled. "Quickly! Tell everyone to retreat. Retreat right now. Have everyone evacuate to the emergency portals in this instant. Send the injured first. The elders have lost." Reporting Entering the strategist's tent, the messenger was casually reporting the situation outside when their expression immediately froze. Not long after, their entire body trembled, and the demon prostrated itself to the ground. "Why, Your Highness?" he greeted Jezebeth, not daring to look up at all. He even held his breath, afraid of somehow getting on his bad side for breathing too rapidly or loudly. "Continue." A soft voice reached him, enveloping every part of his body and jerking his body up from the ground. The messenger was not even able to react to what had happened when he found himself standing a couple of meters away from the strategist, who was wearing a white mask and staring at him with his deep green eyes. "What's the current situation?" "Ah, right." The messenger quickly recollected himself and reported. "The seven heads have fought against the strongest members of the other races. The patriarchs of the Pride clan and Greed clan have both sustained injuries, but they aren't extremely serious. They will need a bit of time to fully recover. The advisor's brows furrowed upon listening to the message. 2 of the patriarchs have sustained injuries? Well, this was outside of his expectations. Initially, he thought they'd have been able to get rid of them without suffering much, but he underestimated the tenacity of the leaders from the 3 races. Currently, the forces of the 3 races are set to be retreating from the battlefield. They are barely holding on and the war is as good as over. I see. The strategist nodded his head, absorbing the information slowly. It was only after a couple of minutes had passed that he raised his head. You can leave. He dismissed the messenger and proceeded to sit back down in his chair. Making himself comfortable, he cast a small glance in the direction of Jezebeth, who was seated not so far from where he was. He had his eyes closed and his lips were slightly curled at its ends. The war is as good as over, huh? The strategist had mixed thoughts about those words. Casting his gaze away from Jezebeth, he bitterly shook his head. To be honest, the war had been over ever since quite a while back. From the moment that Jezebeth was back, he knew that the most powerful members of the 3 races had been disposed of and that the war had ended at that moment. What was left behind were merely the scraps of civilizations that were set to be doomed. Is this what he wanted to show me? The strategist secretly clenched his fist underneath the desk. It had been quite a while since he had been with him and he had learned a lot about him. He understood that what was happening to him was a short preview of what was to come later. He was probably sending him a warning. What do you suggest we do, strategist? A voice brought the strategist away from his thoughts, and his head raised up in confusion. When he looked around and he saw everyone's gaze focus on him, he recollected himself and cleared his throat. Finish the Leave them be. A certain voice cut the advisor off. Swoosh, swoosh. In unison, everyone's heads turned in the direction of where the voice came from and soon, everyone's gaze was on Jezebeth. He had a simple smile on his face at the moment and didn't seem to mind the stares that were coming his way. He explained. They will open up a portal that will connect them to Earth. That's where they are planning on retreating. A look of understanding appeared on the faces of those present. They plan to join with the remaining forces that are still alive and hold the fort from there. If we attack now, we're bound to sustain enormous losses, so just let them enter the portal. Wouldn't that be disadvantageous for us? The strategist suddenly asked, unable to understand Jezebeth's motives. He soon felt his gaze on him and their eyes met. You're not wrong. Jezebeth nodded his head. Getting rid of them now would indeed be a good option, but you guys seem to be forgetting something. Jezebeth's eyes scanned the room. The real enemies aren't the ones over here but the ones over there. Allowing them to retreat is more beneficial than you can imagine. In fact, it's within our best interest if they all retreat and enter Earth. Jezebeth's words brought confusion to the room as everyone looked at each other, unable to understand what he was trying to say. This went for most of those present, but there was one exception. Wait. It was at that moment that the strategist's eyes opened wide and Jezebeth's smile deepened. Don't tell me. Chapter 796, The Final Hurdle 2. Let them retreat, it's an order. A raspy voice made its way inside the minds of the demons on the battlefield. Immediately, all of the demons came to a halt and looked at each other in bewilderment. They wanted to double-check that they hadn't heard something wrong, and as soon as they realized that they hadn't, they looked around in complete and utter shock. Let them retreat? Angelica behaved exactly the same as the other demons when she suddenly stopped in the middle of the air and looked around her in bewilderment. The message? It didn't make sense. Why would you order us to retreat when we're so close to securing victory? The orders made no sense to her and probably to almost every other demon out there. The fuck is going on? At that moment she heard an irritated voice from beside her. As she turned her head, she observed a familiar demon. She appeared perplexed and irritated by the current situation. Angelica had already grown accustomed to her behavior despite having only known her for a short period of time. Hey, do you have any idea of what's going on? Priscilla asked her, gently flapping her wings once and appearing within her proximity. I'm not sure. Angelica shook her head. She was similarly perplexed about the situation at hand, and it was likely the case for all the demons around them. Every demon is now ordered to return to the logistical area. His Majesty would like to grant everyone a few words. All it took were 2 words, and all of the bewilderment that had been visible on the demons' faces vanished, and in its place was a look of complete and utter excitement. His Majesty would like to share a few words with us? All of the demons' confusion and discontentment regarding the orders vanished in an instant, and they dashed toward the logistical area, which was situated at the very back of the battleground. There was a palpable excitement in the air, and even those who were injured did their best to make it back to the logistical area. This was how much weight the Demon King's name carried among the demons. He was akin to a god to them, and no one dared to be disrespectful toward him. He was, after all, the demon that had revived their race. If it weren't for him, the demons never would have evolved into such a powerful race as they have today. In all likelihood, they would have most probably been bottom feeders had it not been for him. Hunted by the other races for their mana-devouring abilities. The Demon King wants to part us with a few words? Angelica's ears picked up Priscilla's mutter, and she turned her head to look at her. Do you despise His Majesty? Angelica questioned her after observing her reaction and noticing that she did not appear to be as enthusiastic as the other demons. Despise His Majesty? Priscilla raised her head and looked at her as if she was out of her mind. Why would I hate His Majesty? What gave you such thoughts? Noel. You don't seem to be particularly excited at the prospect of getting to meet him in a bit and listening to his words. I could say the same thing about you, Priscilla pointed out. Indeed, just like her, Angelica didn't show much of a reaction to the news and remained in the air with her. She shook her head. I'm sorry. I guess you have a point. No shit. Priscilla did not chew her words and instead cocked her head to the side to take another look at the fleeing army. She wanted nothing more than to keep pursuing them, and her eyes were filled with reluctance. But after thinking about the contents of the message, she had no choice but to give up. Let's go. Are you coming? She glanced at Angelica, who appeared to still be floating in place. Her expression was rather icy and difficult to interpret, but Priscilla caught a glimpse of something. It left as fast as it came, but it didn't escape Priscilla's eyes. I'm coming. Nonetheless, Angelica played it cool and decided to follow after her. After that, both of them spread their wings, and the outline of their bodies became less clear. The logistical area was starting to become packed. It had only been an hour since the message was broadcast, and in what felt like minutes, the entire land was swiftly submerged in a sea of demons. The land was completely silent. And the fact that no one uttered a single sound throughout the entirety of the event made the strangeness of the circumstance even more pronounced. The focus of everyone's attention was drawn to a particular tent located off in the distance. It was the strategist's tent, and while it didn't seem like it at first, everyone was sure that His Majesty was in that tent. Such presence. Angelica and Priscilla were 2 of the very last people to arrive, and by the time they did so, the location was already very close to being completely occupied. They maintained their silence along with the rest of the demons and continued to fix their gaze on the tent that was located further away. They were having a hard time keeping their eyes open because of the intense pressure that was coming from inside the tent. This fact alone was sufficient to serve as an indication to the demons that were present as to who was present within the tent. And as a result, the breath of a good number of the demons became labored. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone stopped breathing as one figure after another materialized right next to the tent in that very instant. Particularly when they noticed the facial expressions of a couple of the demons that had appeared before the tent. It was anything but pleasant at the moment. It's the 7 patriarchs. Someone muttered in a low voice, recognizing them immediately. He wasn't the only one who recognized them, as nearly everyone within the plot of land had an idea of who they were. And if that wasn't enough, the pressure emanating from their bodies told them exactly what kind of beings stood before them. Angelica was no exception as her gaze fixed on one of the demons ahead. Her gaze was anything but pleasant. Swoosh. The door to the tent suddenly opened and everyone's attention immediately focused on the tent. The first person to emerge from the tent was a lanky demon who was dressed in a black robe. Their posture was stooped, and they appeared to have an unimaginably pale expression. He wasn't the only one who appeared to be in this state. Another figure soon emerged, and it appeared to be in a similar state to the first demon who emerged from the tent. As the minutes ticked by, one demon after another emerged from the tent. When the timer hit 5 minutes, a man wearing a white mask emerged from the encampment. It's the strategist. The strategist. His entrance caused a commotion among the army, and everyone turned their attention to him with great interest as the commotion spread. This was probably the first time that many of the demons had ever seen the strategist in person. The white mask, which was something he was known for wearing, was the only thing that allowed them to identify him so quickly. It was all thanks to that they were able to recognize him. Why does he look familiar? Angelica's expression became somewhat different while everyone else was preoccupied with talking about the strategist. When her eyes laid on him, she felt something stir from within her. His build, his hair, and most importantly, his eyes. They felt awfully familiar and reminded her of a certain someone. That he was someone she couldn't forget even now, and she didn't realize how important they were until after they were gone. No, that's impossible. Angelica shook her head, casting her gaze away from the strategist. Pent-up emotions that she kept hidden within her started to swell up, and she was reminded of a certain painful memory. One that she didn't want to relieve. Are you that moved by the strategist? Pardon? Angelica looked at Priscilla with a confused look. Did the strategist move you or something? Or is it the prospect of meeting His Majesty? What are you talking about? Angelica's brows furrowed, but just as she was about to speak again, Priscilla pointed at her cheek. You're telling me that you haven't been noticing the tear on your cheek? Angelica flusteredly touched her cheek. Feeling something wet, her face stiffened and her gaze fell back on Priscilla. She didn't know what to say. It's okay. Priscilla turned her gaze away from her. You don't need to look at me like that. If you look around, you aren't the only one that is acting this way. There are many other demons that are moved. Don't worry. I won't judge you. Angelica didn't know how to respond. She wanted to say something, but she knew that Priscilla's mind was already made up, so she decided against it and turned her gaze back toward the strategist. She pursed her lips as she continued to look, and she noticed that their figures were becoming more entwined. What is wrong with me? She silently muttered, trying her best to keep herself from losing composure again. Thankfully, a sudden wave of whispers helped her out. His Majesty is coming. It's His Majesty. He's here. Lord Jezebeth. The Demon King had made his appearance. Chapter 797, The Final Hurdle 3. We've come a long way, everyone. Jezebeth stared at the sea of demons that stood before him. They numbered in the millions and they all looked at him with fervent eyes. The sight made Jezebeth smile. Who'd have thought that our race, which was on the verge of extinction a few centuries ago, is now the most dominant of all races? The sight. It moved him, and the smile on his face deepened if ever so slightly. A lot of you are probably confused, perhaps even annoyed by the sudden orders, but I want to make something clear. Jezebeth paused and looked down at all of the demons present. The order. It was something that I had passed down. It was a decision that I made and not something that was made on the fly. Jezebeth's soft voice traveled through the ears of each of the demons present. It gently vibrated within their minds, and almost seemed to bewitch some of the demons as their eyes turned hazy and their bodies swayed. If you are dissatisfied with the orders, you can voice out your complaints now. I'm all ears. Jezebeth stopped and looked at the army of demons in front of him. He waited for someone to speak up, but none dared. The place was incredibly quiet, and all the demons looked at him with the same eyes as before. So it seems like no one here is dissatisfied. He didn't know whether to be happy or disappointed with this news. He would have loved to have seen a few demons oppose him, show him that they were different from the others, but he was disappointed to know that such demons didn't exist. I expected too much. Hiding his disappointment, Jezebeth raised his head up and looked at the demons in front of him once more. Now that I got out of the way, I am happy to announce that the war is officially over. Jezebeth continued before the other demons could cheer. But, and I mean but, the real war hasn't even started yet, so don't be too quick to rejoice. As if pouring cold water on them, all of the demons that were previously showing excited expressions revealed disappointed ones. Jezebeth continued. What we have dealt with at the moment is merely a taste. A taste of the true war that is about to come to us. What everyone had currently experienced was merely the prelude to the true war that was about to come. Their forces were strong, and Jezebeth was confident in his chances of victory, but that was before he came to learn of Kevin's action. At the moment he was uncertain. He was uncertain about the imminent future. What he previously thought was certain was no longer certain, and at the moment, all preparations seemed for naught. That being said, there was actually one certainty, and that this was truly the last regression. Having collected all of the Akashic fragments, he was certain and knew that whoever won between the two of them would be the ultimate winner. With the protectors gone, there was nothing stopping him from getting to the records. In fact, there was someone. There was a certain someone who held the key to getting to the records. He was someone who he was very familiar with, and the one entity that he could truly claim to fear. He was the only person to have ever beaten him and probably his greatest opponent. I'm afraid that things won't be so simple anymore now that Kevin has given him all of his powers. Just thinking of him made his core palpitate and his gaze shifted toward his right. He felt himself relax and his face loosened. That's right, I'm not completely unprepared. There was still a little something that he had. Get ready. We will soon depart. He gazed at the army of demons in front of him and turned around. Victory or defeat will dictate whether we will be the only race that exists within the universe. You're planning on migrating everyone here? It was Octavius's voice that rang loudly inside my office. It was just the two of us at the moment, and he looked at me with a look that seemed to suggest I was crazy. I'm not crazy. Like hell you aren't. That's kind of rude. Laying out the truth doesn't make me rude. Oh yeah, it does. Then you're delusional. There you go being rude again. Is this how you treat your savior? This went on between Octavius and me for who knows how many more minutes or hours. I had lost count. Come on, you know best that I'm making the right decision. Even though I could see where he was coming from, I still don't think my choice was that illogical. When one stopped to think about it, it was obvious that this made perfect sense, and I had no doubt that Octavius was aware of this on some level. That being said, I really can't get used to this new Octavius. I was completely at a loss for words. He was displaying a great deal more emotion than he ever had in the past, and some of the things he was saying and doing with his face were quite unsettling. I want the old Octavius back. As much as I despised the old Octavius, he was incredibly rational and never let his emotions get the better of him. A stark contrast to the current Octavius, who appeared to be on an emotional high, if one could put it that way. It's not like it's a bad thing, but in situations like these, it's really annoying. Are you honestly not concerned about the blowback that is going to be directed toward you in the near future? Do you realize that the majority of people will be angry with you because of the decision you make? Do you have absolutely no interest whatsoever in the potential protests that will take place? Calm down for a moment and listen to me. I let out a sigh and pinched the middle of my brows. Thankfully, my words seemed to have reached his ears and he soon calmed down. I continued. To begin, I will not be forcing anyone into going to Amora. I already stated this to Malin and the others. Everyone is free to decide for themselves whether they want to come here or not. It would be a different story if I forced them, but since I'm not going to do that, I'm confident that there won't be any protests. And if it turns out that some do exist, I'll have to reevaluate my perspective on where we stand as a species. Nobody would be that stupid, right? They should know better than anyone that a war is about to come. And what I am doing is merely providing them with a safe haven to help them avoid this war and not die a useless death. Another reason was that I didn't want them to be a burden on me, but I kept that to myself. For those who chose to remain, I decided to let them be, and if they were in danger, I would place them at the bottom of my priority list of the things that I needed to care about. I couldn't allow them to become a burden to me. Okay, I get it. Octavius sat in front of me, calming down at last. His expression returned to normal for the first time in a while, and he fell into deep thought. Normal was a bit of an overstatement since this was supposed to be his normal self. All right, he eventually said, raising his head to meet my line of sight. Rubbing his chin, he leaned back on the chair and asked, if we're going to do this, how much do you need? How much? As in cores. Oh. My brows furrowed. Indeed, in order for me to open a portal, I needed to use a core as a source of energy. I remember telling him this piece of information beforehand. If an S-ranked core is enough for tens of thousands of people, then, if I am to take into consideration that I am probably going to migrate over millions. My expression turned grim. Most probably several SS-ranked cores. I sighed, feeling a little part of my heart ache. It was such a big expenditure, and with it I'd probably be able to add even more mana to the city, but I still felt my heart ache. Those were a lot of cores. If not for the fact that they were a necessary expenditure, I would have probably used them for something else. Several. Octavius's lips trembled at my words, but he eventually managed to calm himself down. I understand. He stood himself up with the assistance of the chair's armrests and then turned his attention to the door of the room. He walked toward it at a slow pace. I'll tell them of your decision through a press conference I'll arrange soon. The media will soon make an announcement throughout the entire domain. His feet came to a stop right before the door. Do you really think there won't be any backlash? I'm certain. If there was one thing I was confident in, it was this. Okay then. Octavius placed his hand against the doorknob and just as he was about to twist it, he turned around again. By the way. He paused. What's the name of the city? The name of the city? I opened my mouth and just as I was about to speak, my mouth closed. Thinking for a moment, my lips curled. It was a cringeworthy name, but as I imagined how he would have reacted had he still been alive, I found myself laughing silently to myself. Almost like an inside joke, and the thought was what made me go through with the decision. Perhaps, deep inside of me, I preyed on the thought that one day he'd see what I had built and curse at me for what I had named it. I'd always laugh whenever I thought of the improbable possibility. Nonetheless, it was this single idea that inspired me to name the city as such. Voss City. I looked at Octavius and repeated. This time more slowly. The name of the city. It's Voss City. Chapter 798, The Great Migration 1. He gives the impression that we have a choice, but if the vast majority of the population abandons us, what are we supposed to do to make a living? Because no one is working anymore, nothing will work and we will simply be forced to relocate along with everyone else. I have every right to be angry. Why do we have to abandon our current lives? I understand that there will soon be a war, but what would be the point of fleeing? In the event that they end up losing, the next thing that will come under attack will be this new safe haven. It's such an idiotic thing to do. Whose choice was it to appoint him as the head of the alliance? Since Octavius is the most capable, he ought to be the one to take charge of everything. He was a significantly more capable leader than Ren ever was or ever will be. Click. Whoo. I turned off the screen and took a deep breath. It took every bit of strength I had not to rip the TV in half and start yelling curses. Do you really think there won't be any backlash? I'm certain. My words were starting to haunt me. When I thought about the words that I had said to Octavius with such confidence some time ago, I felt the anger that I had been attempting to stifle rise up once more, and I almost threw a fit. Fuck, and here I had hopes people were a lot smarter. I had given them too much credit. I now understand how presidents or whoever is in charge feel when they are in office. No matter what they did, they were going to get criticized, and the majority of the time, the people who were criticizing them probably didn't even have a complete understanding of what was happening and were just imitating the voices in their ears. Ignorance at its best, I guess. I leaned back against my chair. In a way, what they said wasn't completely faultless. The economy and society that had been established would collapse as a result of everyone migrating, leaving those who were left behind to fend for themselves. I kind of knew this beforehand. It was not difficult to foresee the effects that a massive migration would have on the economy and the functioning of society, but it was a necessary step for humanity. If they did not migrate, the casualties that would come from the third cataclysm would simply be too disastrous. You could say that I was aware of the repercussions that would come with the migration, but I chose not to act on them. It was so that I'd indirectly force them to go to Amora. Shit, am I becoming a politician? Oh no. Doc. A knock brought me out of my delusions and Amanda entered the room. Her previously relaxed face became contorted as she surveyed the room. It's a mess. That. I looked around me and shut my mouth before I could even retort. There was a lot of clutter in the room, and there was nothing I could say to persuade her otherwise. With papers strewn everywhere and sofa cushions thrown about in the room, I gave up resisting before putting up a fight. Come, I'm ready. I stood up and extended both of my arms. ? Amanda's head cocked to the side, visible confusion etched on her face. Ready for what? For the punishment. What punishment? Amanda took a step back and wearily looked at me. Why would I punish you? You're a grown adult and I'm not your mother. You should know better and take care of your surroundings without the need for me to tell you. That hurt a lot more than I thought. Oh. I lifelessly sat down in my seat. What are you getting all grumpy for? Amanda moved behind me, placing her hands over my shoulders and gently kneading them. It felt rather good as I leaned back and relaxed. I guess I could forgive her. Not that I was mad at her to begin with. How's the migration going? I asked Amanda while closing my eyes. Her soothing voice reached my ears as I basked in the relaxing feeling. I needed this. So far, everything has been going without a hitch. Those who come from the same districts are being moved over one at a time, and according to Ryan's calculations, the process should be finished in about a week's time. A week's time? That was faster than I expected. I'd originally thought I'd take a month, but apparently, I had severely underestimated how well organized the alliance was. With their help, everything was sorted out rather quickly. Do you have a list of how many chose to remain on Earth? Amichum. Amanda nodded her head and removed her hands from my shoulders. I instantly felt that something was missing, but I kept it all to myself. She leaned against the desk. Surprisingly, there aren't a lot of people that are choosing to stay behind. The majority of those who have chosen to remain are elderly people and people who feel a strong connection to the land and the homes they have lived in all their lives. I see. This was in line with what I had anticipated, but it was reassuring to learn that the number of people who decided to stay put was relatively low. I'd make things a lot simpler and less difficult for myself. What about the situation with the demons? Have you cleaned them all up? About that. Amanda's expression changed a little. She looked rather troubled. What is it? Did something happen? Spit it out. No, well. Amanda sighed and looked at me. It's Emma. She's taken charge of the operation at your orders, but she seems adamant about talking with you at the moment. She's been calling me nonstop for the past few days and I'm not really sure what I should do. Listening to her words, I turned my head away from Amanda. Well, shit. I didn't need Amanda to clarify further what Emma wanted to talk to me about. It was probably the whereabouts of her father. I had long seen this coming and had been delaying it for as long as possible. Even after all of this time, struggled to think of ways to explain to her what had happened to her father, and while telling her the truth was something that I needed to do, I found it rather hard to do so. How was I going to tell her that her father wasn't the person she thought he was? If only Kevin was still here. Well, what should I tell her? Amanda's voice brought me back and I pursed my lips. Phone in hand, she looked at me. If you want, I can message her right now. I'm not exactly sure since I'm not with her, but I've been getting reports that she's rather restless these days. I think you should talk to her. I know. I sighed and leaned back against the chair. For now, tell Emma to focus on her mission. Regarding her father, tell her that he's on a very important mission. A secretive one, and that he won't be able to meet her for a while. I'll fill her in on the details later. Okay. Amanda's thumb quickly moved across the screen of her phone, and she quickly sent the message. She then looked at me while putting the phone away. What really happened to her father? Huh. I raised my brow. What do you mean? Ren. Amanda sighed. For how long do you think we've known each other for? You may be able to fool others because your poker face makes it difficult to read your expressions, but you can't fool me. I've spent enough time with you to know what you're thinking. Oh. I scooted my chair back while warily looking at Amanda. You're clearly hiding something about Oliver, and while I won't force you to tell me, I can tell at a glance that he's not on some sort of secret mission. The room fell into a state of silence after her words. I honestly didn't know what to say at this moment. I was being completely seen through by Amanda. Somehow, I don't feel bitter about it. I'd normally feel uncomfortable if someone read through my intentions, but the same wasn't true for Amanda. I somehow felt a bit better and my shoulders seemed to relax. I really can't beat you. I sighed while shaking my head. He truly was. Here. Thank you. Amanda presented me with a glass of water and I took a sip. Feeling the coolness in my mouth, I opened my mouth but then closed it again. Turning my head to look at her, I had a sudden thought. I smiled. Hey, Amanda. Yes. She looked at me, her brows slowly coming together. The sight made me smile even more as I suddenly stood up and moved toward her. She scooted back into the desk. What are you doing? We're in your office. Her voice grew more timid by the second, and by the time I was a few inches away, it was as quiet as a mosquito buzz. Don't worry. I gently caressed her hair and moved my head toward her ear. I whispered. Get your mind out of the gutter. A white glow formed on my hand and I touched her forehead. It was time for her to see everything that I went through in that world. Chapter 799 The Great Migration 2. The memories swept through her consciousness like a tsunami, penetrating every nook and cranny of her mind and taking control of everything that was contained therein. Amanda felt as though her world was spinning as a series of images began to pop into her head. She wasn't sure how long she had been standing there, but when she came to, she noticed that the sun had already started to set. "You've finally digested the memories?" It was from behind her that she heard a voice that she knew all too well. She sat herself down on his chair without even bothering to look at him and tried to digest everything that had been thrown at her. She propped her elbows against the table and massaged her forehead. The memories. Her head throbbed. Are they real? Why wouldn't they be? Rin appeared right in front of her. He looked at her with a smug expression on his face, and the corners of his lips were slightly upturned. The expression on his face. She was genuinely irritated by it, but as she thought back on the memories that were flooding her mind, she found that she couldn't bring herself to complain about it. Was that really her? Hee. Rin laughed in the most irritating manner and sat down on the desk. What do you think? He moved his body in closer proximity to her, and his eyes narrowed as he did so. At the same time, the smile that had been partially visible on his face gradually vanished, and what replaced it was an extremely serious expression. Squid-like person? His voice was calm, but Amanda could feel the hidden anger within it. His ego had been hurt. I didn't know you thought of me like that, Amanda. I'm honestly quite hurt. He continued on. There was a look of expectation in his eyes as if he wanted her to correct what her other self had said, but Amanda didn't give him that benefit. When she raised her head, she purposely squinted her eyes and cocked her head. I guess you. She stopped herself mid-sentence and shook her head. No, never mind. You don't look like a squid. Wait, hold on. You think I'm deaf? You clearly were about to say something. Ren's expression changed for the worse, and he leaned his body forward. He seemed rather desperate at the moment, and Amanda's lips trembled. She was having a hard time keeping herself composed. It's too easy. As impressive as Ren was, he was the simplest person to read. She knew him like the back of her hand, and pressing his buttons wasn't something that she found difficult. With that said, was that really me? Amanda tried to conceal her expression by covering her face with her hands. Despite not being able to view her own memories, she had seen enough from Ren's perspective to find herself secretly squealing at her own behavior. Would that really be how she would have turned out if the Demon King had never existed? It made her shiver. Hey Amanda. Why aren't you answering? Calm. Lifting her head up, she leaned her body forward and pressed her lips against Ren's. He stopped talking immediately after that, and his expression blanked. Pursing her lips, Amanda sat back down on the chair. You've worked hard. I've got 6 orbs with me and there's 7 of you present. Jezebeth looked at the 7 demons that were standing right in front of him while 6 white orbs floated atop his palm. The demons' presence was unlike any other, and their expressions contained nothing but reverence for him. They were the 7 clan heads. My lord, we will accept any decision that you make. With a subtle bow of his head, Prince Murdoch, the head of the clan of Envy, spoke. I do not know what those orbs are, but if you are giving them to us, they must be of significant value. His words reflected the thoughts of the other heads. I guess you can say so. The yellow orbs around Jezebeth cycled atop his palm. They are indeed rather precious. So much so that you might even find your strengths increasing. All breathing stopped the moment those words escaped from his mouth. The 7 demons' expressions changed when they learned that receiving the yellow orbs would increase their strength. At their current level, increasing their strength was nearly impossible, and almost everyone was stuck in the same rank for a considerable amount of time. The fact that the orbs could increase their strength. Eyeing the orbs in Jezebeth's palm, intense greed flashed across the eyes of all 7 heads. As expected, the sight made Jezebeth smile. He had long known that his words would elicit such a response from them. Since you're all reacting like this, it must mean that all of you want the orbs, don't you? The heads all nodded their heads at once, and Jezebeth laughed. All right then, since I only have 6 and I don't want to pick favorites, I'll do a little something to make all of you happy. He extended his finger forward, and golden runes flashed in the air, enveloping the entire room in a white glow. The white glow agglomerated toward the tip of his finger, forming a small white orb that was of similar size to the yellow orbs. This should be enough. Once the orb formed, Jezebeth looked at the 7 demons and waved his hand forward. Show, show, show. The orbs were fired directly at the 7 demons, and before they could react, their heads rolled back and the room turned white. Human domain, Ashton City. Please maintain order. Don't rush forward. We will call you one at a time. The air was laced with tension as the crowds gathered around the portal, waiting for their turn to step through and embark on a journey to a new world. Excitement and anxiety hung palpably in the air as people whispered amongst themselves, unsure of what awaited them on the other side. Some families were dressed in their finest clothes as if this were the start of a grand adventure, while others wore practical and sturdy outfits meant for travel. All of them clutched their belongings tightly, double-checking that they hadn't forgotten anything. The promise of a new life was too great to risk leaving anything behind. They promised us shelter, right? A woman asked her husband, her voice trembling with nervousness. Yes, he replied, trying to hide his own uncertainty. They said that they would guarantee us shelter and food. Are there any pictures of the place? Another man asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Yes, I already sent it to you on the chat. His friend responded, pulling out his phone to show the group. The portal itself was a towering structure, gleaming in the sunlight. It pulsed with a soft blue light that spread across the surrounding land. The hum of the portal's energy was almost deafening, causing many to clutch their ears. Your ID, please. An official called out, bringing everyone back to the present moment. Officials greeted each group as they came forward, checked their identification and provided them with instructions for the journey ahead. Here you go, officer. A man said, handing over his identification papers. The officer scrutinized the documents, checking and double-checking the information. Everything checks out. You can go. The officer finally said, waving them forward. There was a sense of anticipation and nervousness in the air. No one knew exactly what to expect on the other side of the portal. Some had seen the pictures of a lush, verdant world that seemed unlike any other, while others whispered of danger and uncertainty. This was to be expected. After all, this was a completely different world and there was barely anything they knew about the planet. The only thing they knew for certain was that this was their only chance for a better life. The portal activated and the first group stepped through. A hush fell over the crowd as they disappeared from sight, and there was a moment of tense silence as everyone waited to see if the portal would malfunction. And then, with a soft hum, the portal activated again, and another group stepped forward to take their turn. Next. The officers called out and the crowds shuffled forward. Like that, more and more people began to move forward, and the crowd of people that numbered in the thousands slowly started to dwindle. The sun, which had previously hung in the sky, started to fall and night started to approach. There were still people lining up behind the portal, and amongst them was a certain family of 3. Come, Nola. We have to hurry or we'll be late. Okay, Mom. Nola put her phone away and followed behind her mother. There were only a couple of people left in the line in front of them, and they were soon going to be called up next. Mom, is Rin coming with us? Rin. Samantha placed her hand over her cheek. Her face looked troubled and a soft voice answered for her. Rin is busy. He said that he'll come when he has time later. Oh. Nola dispiritedly nodded her head. It'd be a lie if she said she wasn't disappointed. It had been quite a long time since she had seen her brother, and while she understood that he was extremely busy handling matters with the Alliance, she would have really appreciated it if he would occasionally come to meet her. With how hectic life had been over the past few years, she hadn't had the time to attend school and she had no friends. The only people she talked to were her father and mother, and they were boring. So boring. What are you thinking so hard about? A hand reached out for her shoulder all of a sudden. Nola noticed a change in her parents' expression when she raised her head, and when she turned around she saw a familiar face. One that she hadn't seen in quite a long time. For some reason, her eyes stung and she found herself unable to contain herself. She instantly threw herself in his direction, going in for a tight hug. Be brother. Ho. Rin was obviously taken aback by Nola's actions, but that was only for a short moment as his face quickly melted and he hugged her back. My, so you finally miss your brother? A stupid smile hung on his lips, and he continued to squeeze Nola's little body, which was locked tightly in his embrace. Hey Nola. You can let go now. This went on for quite a while and she eventually had to be pulled away by Samantha. Rin, do something as well. What, why? Rin looked at her with an aggrieved look, pulling Nola even more tightly into his embrace and turning his body away from her. Bah! Thump! He felt his heart throb for some reason, but the feeling dissipated as fast as it came. We're just hugging each other. Don't interrupt our moment. A3. Stop making a scene. You've been hugging for the past 5 minutes. We're up next, so get her off your body. Tisk. Rin silently clicked his tongue and didn't outwardly show his displeasure. He had no death wish. Nola, you can let go now. If you don't let go, Mom will get the two of us into trouble. I'm okay. Nola let go obediently and rubbed her eyes. That's good. He patted her head and cast a glance at the portal in the distance. Be a good girl and listen to Mom and Dad. While the city is safe, don't do anything stupid while you're there. If you behave well, I'll give you a nice surprise. Okay. Nola obediently nodded her head once again, carefully listening to Ren's words. Such behavior made him smile even more and his expression almost crumbled. Standing up, he looked at his parents and hugged the two of them. Bah! Thump! Once again his heart throbbed and he felt his legs tremble a little. What's going on with me? The feeling came and went quickly, but it left an impression on him as he tried to check if something was wrong with his body. However, when he saw that everything was normal, he could only shrug his shoulders. Maybe it's 'cause I won't see them for quite a while. Probably was that. Have a safe trip. Chapter 800 The Great Migration 3. It's becoming quieter in here. I glanced around the empty streets of Ashton City, feeling a sense of desolation settle within me. It was eerily quiet, as if the very air had been sucked out of the city. The once bustling metropolis had been reduced to a ghost town, with the population dwindling day by day. The aftermath of the war with the monolith had taken its toll on the city, and the current migration had made the situation return to what it once was. I sighed, my gaze drifting toward the portal that stood before me. Jean was standing in front of it, flanked by a few familiar figures, Emma, Amanda, and Melissa. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy at the thought of their impending departure. They were leaving for Amora, a place I worked so hard to develop and make into the best place to live in. I really wanted to go. Why aren't you coming with us? Jin's voice interrupted my thoughts and I turned to face him. I've got a few things that I need to do over here and I can't go there. I replied, my tone neutral. It was only half the truth, but I couldn't reveal the real reason why I couldn't accompany them to Amora. Jezebeth was still out there somewhere and he was relentless in his pursuit of me. His ability to track me down made it impossible for me to stay in one place for too long. This was especially so after I gained Kevin's power. If I were to go to Amora, there was a high chance that he would find out my whereabouts and hunt me down. I couldn't risk putting Amanda and the others in danger, which left me with no choice but to stay behind and keep Jezebeth's attention diverted from them. When will you be coming? Emma's voice rang and I smiled at her. I will probably not be coming for long. Perhaps once every week, and I'll stay at most for a couple of days over there. You see, there's a lot of things that I need to do here and I can't stay there for very long. Emma looked at Amanda, her skepticism apparent. I knew she didn't believe me, but I couldn't blame her. I really was hiding something. Only once a week? Emma's voice was tinged with confusion, and I felt a pang of guilt in my chest when she looked at Amanda. And you're okay with this? You do know that we'll be gone for about 5 years. Are you okay with only seeing him once every couple of months? Amanda shook her head, her expression normal. No. But I understand where he's coming from, so I can only accept the situation. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Amanda. As expected of her. She really was understanding. Okay, Emma said, looking defeated. You do whatever you want. I won't interfere in your matters. With that, she turned and handed her identification to one of the guards who stood watch over the portal. The check wasn't very long, but it felt like an eternity. I watched as Emma, Amanda, and Jean stepped through the portal, disappearing from sight. See you in a week then. Bye. Have a safe trip. I murmured, waving my hand in farewell. As they vanished from view, a sense of loneliness settled within me. The thought of being alone in Ashton City for the next half a year was somewhat daunting, but I knew I had to keep going. I had a mission to fulfill and I couldn't let anything get in the way of that. Taking a deep breath, I turned and walked away from the portal, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. There was work to be done. Just what are you planning? Jean stood there quietly staring at Ren. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it was about Ren that made him feel so uneasy. Was it the way he was looking at them now, or was it something deeper? Whatever it was, it had been gnawing at Jean for some time now, and he couldn't help but feel like he was missing something important. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, lost in thought. Ren said nothing, just watching him with a patient expression. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Jean turned around and started walking toward the portal. He didn't look back, not wanting to see Ren's face again. As he walked, Jean couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration. It was as if he were walking into a safe haven meant just for him. He wasn't the only one who felt this way either. Everyone's expression was somewhat similar, as if they were all heading towards an uncertain future. In the end, it all came down to the fact that they were all still too weak. While they were strong, they were still far from strong enough to be of any help to Ren. He was carrying the entire burden by himself and trying to keep them protected at the same time. It was a heavy burden to bear, and Jean didn't envy him for it. I don't like it, Jean muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the sound of his footsteps. He didn't want to feel like a burden, and when he looked around and stared at the others, he could see that they were having similar thoughts as him. The portal hummed and shimmered as they approached it, and Jean couldn't help but feel a sense of commitment. I've got 5 years. 5 years to become stronger. 5 years to become useful. His vision warped, and he appeared in the middle of a large city. At a glance, it reminded him of Ashton City, but it was at the same time different. The towering trees, the other races, and the thinned-out mana. It was similar but different. Jean looked around, taking in his surroundings. The city was bustling with activity as people of all races went about their business. It was a vibrant, lively place, but Jean couldn't shake off a certain feeling. He reminded himself of how Ren looked before he left, and the scenery before him didn't look as lively as it once did. Should we go to our residences? Right then he heard Melissa's voice and he turned to look at her. She looked absolutely normal at the moment. Perhaps out of everyone she was the one that seemed the calmest, and when Jean thought about it he wasn't surprised. He had always been like this. Placing his hand inside his pocket and fiddling with a certain box, he retrieved a cigarette and placed it in his mouth. Puff. He took a deep drag, feeling the smoke fill his lungs. For a moment he closed his eyes, enjoying the sensation. A certain demoness appeared within his mind at the moment, and he felt the edges of his lips curl up at that moment. I wonder how she's doing at the moment? If she saw him again like this, would she throw a fit or would she try to steal his cigarettes? He involuntarily chuckled and shook his head. Arrogant demoness. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Melissa looking at him with a curious expression. Since when did you start smoking? She asked, pointing at the cigarette. Jean smiled faintly. It's just a habit, he said, taking another drag. It helps me relax. Oh, I see. Melissa nodded, her interest in the topic quickly waning. She surveyed the city that surrounded them and pointed in a certain direction. Should we go to our residences? Jean considered it for a moment before nodding. Yeah, we should. I need to rest a little. He took another drag from his cigarette before flicking it away. Lead the way. Lead the way. You speak as if I know the way. Right. You still haven't left yet? Ashton City may have been desolate, but not everyone had left. Coming into my office was a face I thought I wouldn't see for quite a while. Not yet, I still have something that I want to talk to you about. Well, okay. I didn't have much to do anyway, so I sat on my chair and pointed at the seat opposite me. Have a seat for now, Octavius. Thank you. He sat himself down and looked around the room with a curious look. Making yourself comfortable? Well, it's not like there's a point in going back home anymore. With everyone gone, I didn't feel the need to go back home, so I installed a bed in my own office. Was a bit weird, but it was functional. Well, all right. Octavius's gaze did not linger too long on my bed, and he assumed a solemn expression. So, what is it that you want to talk to me about? For him to come to me after everyone had gone. He must definitely have something serious to talk about. It certainly piqued my curiosity. About that. After a moment of hesitation, Octavius exhaled and explained everything to me. Hearing what he had to say, I was left at a loss for words as my body stiffened. contents of his words. They weren't something I'd expect to ever come out from his mouth. Are you sure? I asked, my tone taking an extremely serious note. Leaning his body forward, Octavius nodded his head, and when I looked at his eyes, I knew that he had made up his mind on the matter. My hand trembled for a moment, but I eventually nodded my head. Hey, I'll help you, N. I paused for a moment and looked straight into his eyes. Make sure you make these 5 years count. You don't have to tell me that. Octavius answered, a smile finally lingering over his features. It was a smile I had never seen him make before, and it radiated serenity. It was as if he'd come to peace with something. I found myself unable to look at him and my head lowered. Chapter 801 Alone on Earth 1. I hope he saw the message. Reminding myself of a certain demon with pink hair, I shook my head. My preparations were almost done. All I needed were the conditions. Whoo! I looked around me while taking a deep breath. The silence was deafening. It was the only thing that filled the air. No sound of cars passing by or people chatting in the distance. It was just me standing there in the middle of an empty street. I looked around, taking in the desolate landscape. The buildings were empty, and the only thing the occasional sound of a cart moving would reach my ears probably came from the little people that chose to remain back on Earth. While there weren't many, their numbers weren't little. Chirp, chirp. I guess I'm not entirely alone. I bitterly smiled at the thought. Apart from the few people that chose to remain, the animals were still here. You look pitiful. A sudden voice brought me out of my thoughts, and when I turned my head, I was startled to see a familiar figure that bore a striking resemblance to myself, standing in the middle of the road. His gaze indifferently fell on me. Why are you wandering aimlessly like that? I was just looking at my surroundings. I made up an excuse on the spot. To be honest, I actually was wandering around aimlessly, but I didn't want to admit it. Not to him, at least. Should you be looking at your surroundings given the situation that you're in? No. I shook my head. Given that I only had half a year and I wasn't even close to Jezebeth's level, I probably shouldn't have been roaming around the streets like I was doing now. You think you can beat Jezebeth with your current mentality? Why are you grilling me all of a sudden? From the moment he appeared, he started asking me question after question. What was he doing? When did he suddenly start to care? Shouldn't you be hiding in some corner, muttering how you want to die and that I'm stopping you from doing that? I glanced at his hands and feet, which were no longer bound by chains. Let me tell you this, I am no longer stopping you from achieving what you wanted to achieve. Do whatever you want. I was honestly a bit ticked off. For the past years he'd been manipulating me and cursing me. Many times I tried to change his mind and help him out, and yet all he did was spit on me and ignore me. Understanding where he was coming from, I never paid much attention to his behavior. But now that he was finally free and could achieve his long-awaited wish, he suddenly didn't want to? What was this guy up to? Remaining silent, he kept his gaze on me. Just as I was about to say something else, he opened his mouth and spoke. You're a petty man. My left eye twitched. I visibly felt it twitch. You do know we're the same person, right? No. He shook his head. The two of us aren't the same, he continued. What we've experienced and what we've been through, we're completely different people at this point. You may look like me and you may sound like me, but you're not me. So I'm just an inferior copy of you? No. He shook his head once more, his gaze settling over my body. Although I was uncertain for a moment, I felt his lips curl. You're the most perfect version of me. Malin stood next to Gervas and Brutus. They overlooked the city from the building they were in, and their expression quickly turned solemn. What do you think? Do you think you can do it? Gervas asked, his hands placed on the glass pane. Unlike the other two, he had to move a little closer in order to get a better view of the city. It was a bit annoying, but he was already used to it by this point. It's not impossible, Malin muttered, tearing her gaze away from the city. Extending her hand, 3 marble-sized cores of different hues appeared in her hand, and her expression became pained. SS-ranked cores. They were her most prized possessions. The amount of mana that a single core contained was absurd, and a lot could be achieved with them. They were something that had been handed down to her by the other elven forces, and she had never gotten the chance to use them since they were far too valuable for her to use. That was until now. I will begin the operation. Malin took a deep breath, moving away from the glass pane and making her way toward a certain section of the building. As they approached the door to the room, A faint hum could be heard emanating from within. Gervis and Malin exchanged a glance before she reached out to grasp the handle. With a gentle push, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit space that was packed to the brim with electronic equipment. Or at least that was what they seemed to be. The first thing that caught their attention was the wires, thick, black, and snaking across the floor in a chaotic mess. They seemed to converge towards a central point, where a large device sat humming softly in the dim light. A faint glow emanated from it, casting an otherworldly sheen over everything in the room. The device was surrounded by a veritable forest of screens and projections. Holographic images flickered and danced in the air, forming intricate patterns that roamed in the air. "It looks like you've put quite a lot of work on the device," Malin commented, observing the piece of machinery in front of her. She was rather surprised by the structure. While she was already aware of what the dwarves had built, she didn't think it was to this scale. It made her feel rather complicated, but at the same time she felt relief. "Come here." At Gervis's call, she moved toward one of the projections. "Is this where I put them?" Malin pointed toward a small slot on the machinery. It was a smooth concave dent and matched the size of the orb in her hand. "Yes." Gervis nodded, his fingers dancing across the piece of machinery in front of him. Beep. Beep. Once his fingers moved, the machinery came to life and the entire room trembled. Lights flickered in and out of the room, and the roaring sound of an engine reverberated throughout. It startled Malin, who took a step back and looked at the machine with even more wonder. "Place the core on the slot." It was only after she heard Gervis's words that she snapped out of it and did as she was told. Taking a closer step toward the machine, she took out one of the SSS-ranked cores and placed it on the slot. Coming into contact with the core, the machine trembled and a terrifying pressure suddenly bore down on the entire room. The floor of the room started to crack at the pressure, and the building seemed to be on the verge of shaking. Thankfully Brutus was there. Bang! Lightly stopping his foot on the ground, the building stopped shaking, and the pressure that was coming out from the core suddenly subsided and re-entered the core. Gervis shot him a grateful look and turned his attention back to the device in front of him. There was a long bar in front of him. It was slowly filling up, and right when it filled up he pressed a certain button. With a smile he mumbled, "Mana extraction complete. Time to send the mana out." The building did indeed start shaking at his point. The bustling metropolis of Voss City, which had just started to be a place of constant activity, with people rushing to and fro as they went about their daily business, underwent strange changes on this day. It started with a faint tremor that rippled through the ground, almost imperceptible at first. But as the seconds ticked by, it grew stronger and stronger until it felt as though the very earth was shaking beneath their feet. Rumble. The first sign that something was wrong came when the barrier that encircled the entire city began to wobble. At first it was just a faint ripple, but soon it was shaking so violently that people were knocked off their feet. The once sturdy barrier was now like a flimsy sheet of paper, barely holding on against the immense pressure that seemed to be bearing down upon it. Aha! What's going on? Panic quickly set in as people began to realize the gravity of the situation. It was understandable. After all, they had been told the barrier was supposed to be extremely sturdy, and nothing should be able to get through it. Amidst the chaos, questions flew through the air like so many panicked birds. What's going on? Are we under attack? No one seemed to have the answers, and fear began to spread like a contagion through the crowds. Thankfully, the panic was somewhat contained. With no alarms ringing and no visible signs of danger, people began to calm down and take stock of the situation. And when a certain few didn't seem to be concerned about the shaking barrier, it served to calm down the rest of the populace somewhat. But even as people tried to make sense of what was happening, something strange began to occur. The mana in some people's bodies began to boil, almost as if reacting to the seismic tremors that were rocking the city. It was an unusual sensation and one that left people feeling confused and disoriented. Swoosh! As the trembling continued, a sudden breeze blew past, carrying with it an almost tangible wave of mana. The air around them thickened considerably, the mana that had previously been thin and insubstantial now thickening and coalescing into something much more tangible. And as the ground continued to shake, it was clear that something truly momentous was happening, as something that would change the course of Voss City's history forever.